The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty courtyard of the forward operating base in Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her medical pack one final time before stepping into the armored vehicle. As the lead medic for SEAL Team 7, she had seen her share of combat zones, but something about today felt different. The intelligence reports spoke of a high-value target in a remote village, but the details were sketchy at best. Maria had earned her reputation through countless missions where her steady hands and quick thinking had saved lives when everything else fell apart. Her teammates called her Doc, and in the Brotherhood of Special Operations, that title carried weight. She was one of only a handful of female medics attached to SEAL teams, a position she had fought hard to earn and harder to keep. The convoy rolled through the Afghan countryside, kicking up clouds of dust that painted everything in shades of brown and tan. Maria checked her supplies methodically: tourniquets, morphine, bandages, saline bags. Each item had its place. Each could mean the difference between life and death. Her training had taught her to prepare for any scenario, but real combat had taught her that preparation only went so far. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison, the team leader, briefed them over the radio as they approached the target village. The mission was straightforward: capture or eliminate a Taliban commander who had been orchestrating attacks on coalition forces. Intelligence suggested he was hiding in a compound on the village outskirts, protected by a small group of fighters. As they neared the village, Maria noticed something odd. The streets were too quiet, too empty for midday. In her experience, villages this remote usually bustled with activity: children playing, merchants selling goods, elders sitting in shade discussing the day's events. This silence felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. The team dismounted and moved toward their objective with practiced precision. Maria stayed close to Morrison, her medical training secondary to her combat skills in these moments. She carried an M4 rifle alongside her medical equipment, trained to fight first and heal second when bullets started flying. The compound appeared ahead of them, a typical Afghan structure with high mud brick walls and a wooden gate. No signs of movement were visible from their position, but that meant nothing. The enemy had learned to be patient, to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Morrison signaled for the breach. The explosive charge blew the gate open with a thunderous crack that echoed off the surrounding hills. The team poured through the opening, weapons raised, moving with the fluid coordination that came from years of training together. The courtyard was empty except for a woman in traditional Afghan dress sitting alone in the center. She appeared to be in her 30s, with dark hair partially covered by a faded blue headscarf. Her hands were visible, no weapons in sight, but something about her posture struck Maria as wrong. The woman sat too straight, too calm for someone whose home had just been breached by armed soldiers. Morrison approached cautiously, his rifle trained on the woman while other team members secured the surrounding buildings. Maria moved to provide cover, her medical instincts telling her to check if the woman was injured, her combat training telling her to maintain tactical awareness. The woman spoke in accented English, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "You are looking for Commander Hassan. He is not here. He left 3 days ago when he learned you were coming." Maria felt her stomach tighten. If Hassan had advance warning, this could be a trap. She scanned the rooftops and windows, looking for any sign of ambush. Her teammates were doing the same, their movements becoming more tense with each passing second. Morrison kept his weapon aimed at the woman but asked, "Where did he go? Who warned him?" The woman's eyes shifted slightly, and Maria caught something in her expression. Not fear, but calculation. It was the look of someone buying time, making decisions. Maria had seen that look before in combat zones, usually right before everything went sideways. "I am just a civilian," the woman replied, but her tone carried an authority that civilian women in this region rarely possessed. "I know nothing of military matters." That was when Maria noticed the woman's hands. Despite claiming to be a simple villager, her fingers showed no signs of the hard manual labor that marked most rural Afghan women. Her nails were clean, her palms too soft. These were the hands of someone who spent time with books and plans, not cooking pots and farming tools. Before Maria could voice her suspicions, the sharp crack of a sniper rifle echoed from somewhere in the village. The bullet struck the wall inches from Morrison's head, sending chips of mud brick flying. The team immediately took defensive positions, but Maria's attention remained fixed on the woman in the courtyard. Instead of diving for cover like any normal civilian would, the woman remained seated, perfectly calm. A slight smile played at the corners of her mouth, and Maria realized they had walked into exactly the trap she had feared. "Contact front!" Morrison shouted into his radio, but Maria was already moving. Her medical training kicked in as she saw blood spreading across the sleeve of Petty Officer Collins, who had taken a grazing shot while seeking cover behind a low wall. The firefight erupted around them with the intensity that only comes when both sides are professional soldiers. Maria low-crawled to Collins, her medical pack dragging in the dirt behind her. Bullets whined overhead as she quickly assessed his wound, painful but not life-threatening. As she worked to bandage Collins's arm, Maria kept one eye on the mysterious woman. Through the chaos of the firefight, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The woman was no longer sitting passively. She had produced a small radio and was speaking rapidly into it in Pashto. Maria's language training allowed her to catch fragments of the conversation. The woman was coordinating the attack, directing fighters to positions that would maximize damage to the SEAL team. This was no civilian caught in the crossfire. This was a military commander orchestrating an ambush. The realization hit Maria like a physical blow. They had not stumbled into a trap set for them by Hassan. The woman sitting calmly in the courtyard was their actual target. Intelligence had gotten the gender wrong, but everything else fit. The authority in her voice, the tactical knowledge she displayed, the way local fighters responded to her commands, this woman was the Taliban commander they had come to capture. As bullets continued to fly, and Maria finished treating Collins's wound, she found herself in an impossible situation. Her mission as a medic was to preserve life, but her duty as a soldier was to complete the mission. The woman coordinating the attack against her teammates was the same person she would normally be obligated to provide medical care to if she were wounded. The firefight intensified, and Maria realized that their survival might depend on stopping the woman's coordination of the attack. But as she reached for her rifle, the woman's eyes met hers across the chaotic courtyard. In that moment, Maria saw something unexpected: recognition, and perhaps even respect. The battle was far from over, and Maria Santos was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones who understand exactly who you are. The woman's radio crackled with rapid-fire instructions as Maria watched her coordinate the ambush with deadly precision. Each command sent fighters to new positions, turning what should have been a simple capture mission into a carefully orchestrated trap. Maria pressed herself against the courtyard wall, Collins' bandaged arm testament to how quickly the situation had deteriorated. Morrison was shouting orders to his team, trying to organize a fighting withdrawal, but the enemy seemed to anticipate every move. That was when Maria realized the horrible truth. The woman wasn't just directing random fighters. She was commanding people who knew SEAL tactics intimately, possibly from previous encounters or captured intelligence. An explosion rocked the compound as an RPG struck the building where two of their teammates had taken cover. Maria's medical instincts screamed at her to help, but the amount of incoming fire made movement across the courtyard a death sentence. She could hear Petty Officer Williams calling for a medic from somewhere in the rubble, his voice strained with pain. The mysterious woman continued her radio communications, seemingly oblivious to the chaos around her. Maria studied her more carefully during the brief moments between incoming rounds. Her clothing, while traditional Afghan dress, was too clean and well-fitted for someone living in a remote village. The fabric looked expensive, and her boots, barely visible beneath her long dress, were modern tactical footwear, not the sandals or worn shoes typical of local women. More importantly, the way she held herself spoke of military training. Despite the bullets flying overhead, her posture remained controlled and alert. She wasn't cowering or showing any signs of fear. Instead, she sat like someone accustomed to being in command during combat situations. Morrison caught Maria's attention with a hand signal, pointing toward the woman. He had reached the same conclusion. This was their target. But capturing her alive while under heavy fire would be nearly impossible. The Taliban fighters were positioned to protect her specifically, creating overlapping fields of fire that made any approach suicidal. Williams called out again, his voice weaker this time. Maria could see blood pooling beneath the rubble where he was trapped. He needed immediate medical attention, but reaching him would mean crossing 30 feet of open ground under direct enemy observation. It was the kind of impossible choice that defined combat medicine: save the life in front of you or complete the mission that might save many more lives. The woman's eyes found Maria again, and this time she spoke directly to her in clear English. "Your friend is dying. I can call off the attack if you withdraw now." Maria felt her world stop. The woman knew she was the medic. Somehow, she had identified Maria's role and was using Williams' injuries as leverage. It was a calculated psychological attack, designed to exploit the one thing that might make Maria break tactical discipline: her oath to preserve life. Morrison must have heard the exchange because he looked at Maria with grim understanding. They both knew Williams might not survive much longer without treatment, but they also knew that if this woman escaped, she would continue to orchestrate attacks that would kill many more soldiers. The radio chatter from the woman became more urgent. She was clearly receiving reports from her fighters, adjusting their positions to maintain the ambush. Maria realized that the woman's calm demeanor was partly an act. She was under pressure too. Her forces were taking casualties, and she needed the Americans to either retreat or make a mistake she could exploit. That was when Maria noticed something crucial. The woman kept glancing toward a specific building on the compound's eastern side. It was subtle, barely noticeable, but Maria's training had taught her to read body language under stress. The woman was concerned about something in that direction, either an escape route or something valuable she couldn't afford to lose. Williams groaned again, the sound cutting through the gunfire like a knife. Maria made a decision that went against every tactical manual she had ever studied. She stood up slowly, hands visible, her rifle lowered, but ready. "I'm a medic," she called out to the woman. "Let me treat my wounded and we can discuss terms." Morrison started to object, but Maria was already moving. The enemy fire slackened slightly as she walked toward Williams's position, her medical pack clearly visible. It was a calculated risk. Most fighters, even Taliban, respected the Geneva Convention regarding medical personnel, but there were always exceptions. The woman watched Maria with intense interest, her radio momentarily silent. "You would risk your life for one man?" she asked. Maria continued moving toward Williams, her steps steady despite the danger. "It's what medics do, what doctors do." The word doctor seemed to have an effect on the woman. Her expression changed slightly, becoming more thoughtful. "You are a doctor?" Maria reached Williams and quickly assessed his injuries. A piece of concrete had pinned his leg, and he was losing blood from a deep laceration on his thigh. She immediately applied pressure to the wound while responding to the woman's question. "Combat medic. Close enough." Maria's hands worked automatically, applying a tourniquet and preparing an IV line. "You seem to understand medical obligations. Are you a doctor too?" The woman hesitated for just a moment before answering. I studied medicine in Kabul before the war changed everything. That single admission revealed more than the woman probably intended. Medical education in Afghanistan was rare, especially for women, and extremely expensive. This woman came from an educated, wealthy family, the exact demographic that often produced high-level Taliban leadership when the war forced them to choose sides. As Maria worked to stabilize Williams, she kept talking. "What kind of medicine? You must have had to give up a lot when the fighting started." "Emergency medicine," the woman replied, and Maria heard something like regret in her voice. "I wanted to save lives, not take them." Maria understood immediately. They were mirror images of each other, medical professionals shaped by war into different roles. Maria had become a warrior healer, fighting to protect her patients. This woman had become a military commander, fighting for causes that put her medical oath in conflict with her actions. The irony was not lost on either of them. Here they sat in a firefight, two women who had sworn to preserve life, now on opposite sides of a battle that would likely end with one of them dead. Williams's breathing steadied as Maria's treatment took effect. The tourniquet had stopped the bleeding, and the IV was restoring his blood pressure. He would live if they could get him to proper medical facilities, but that meant ending this standoff somehow. The woman had been watching Maria work with professional interest. "Your technique is good. Where did you train?" "Army Medical School, then field experience in Iraq and Afghanistan," Maria answered honestly. There seemed little point in deception now. "You?" "University of Kabul, then Doctors Without Borders in Pakistan." The woman's voice carried a note of pride mixed with sadness. Before politics made such work impossible. Morrison was growing impatient with the conversation. Maria could see him preparing to order an assault, regardless of the cost. She needed to act quickly before the shooting started again and any chance of resolution disappeared. "What's your name?" Maria asked the woman directly. The question seemed to surprise her. After a long pause, she answered, "Dr. Amira Rashid." "And you?" "Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, but my friends call me Doc." Dr. Rashid smiled for the first time, an expression that transformed her face completely. "Mine called me the same thing. Before." The moment of human connection hung between them like a bridge across an impossible divide. Two women who had chosen healing as their profession, now forced by circumstances into roles as warriors. Both bleeding inside from compromises they never wanted to make, yet both steady in their convictions. The silence stretched between Dr. Amira Rashid and Maria Santos as two medical professionals recognized each other across the divide of war. Williams was stable for now, but Maria could see Morrison preparing his team for an assault that would likely cost lives on both sides. She had minutes, maybe less, before the shooting resumed. "Dr. Rashid," Maria said carefully, "you know this won't end well for anyone. Your fighters are good, but we have air support coming. More of my friends will die, and all of yours will too." Amira's expression hardened slightly. "Your air support has been targeting hospitals and schools. Your friends have killed children. Why should I trust anything you say?" Maria felt the weight of every difficult conversation she had ever had with local civilians. The war had created victims on all sides, and she knew that both of their perspectives contained truth. Because right now, you and I are the only ones who might be able to stop more people from dying today. Morrison's hand signals were becoming more urgent. Maria knew he was right to be impatient. Every minute they stayed in this position increased the danger to his team. But she also knew that Dr. Rashid represented something more valuable than a single target. She was an educated leader who might be reasoned with, unlike the fanatical fighters who followed orders without question. "What are you proposing?" Amira asked, though her posture suggested she was still prepared to resume fighting at any moment. Maria made a decision that would either save lives or get her court-martialed. "Medical amnesty. You help me treat any wounded on both sides, and we arrange a withdrawal that doesn't end with everyone dead." The concept of medical amnesty was something Maria had learned about but never applied in the field. It was based on the Geneva Convention's protection of medical personnel, but using it required trust from both sides that rarely existed in counterinsurgency operations. Amira considered the proposal while gunfire continued to echo from other parts of the compound. Her fighters were clearly waiting for orders, but the intensity of the battle had decreased slightly since the two women began talking. "Your commander would agree to this?" Amira gestured toward Morrison, who was visibly struggling with the delay. Maria looked at Morrison and made eye contact. She could see him calculating odds, weighing tactical considerations against the lives of his men. After a long moment, he gave her an almost imperceptible nod. Trust was the foundation of their team, and he was trusting her judgment even though it went against his tactical instincts. "He'll agree," Maria said, "but I need you to do something first. Call off the sniper who's been targeting us. I have wounded to treat, and he's making it impossible." Amira spoke rapidly into her radio in Pashto. The change was immediate. The suppressive fire that had been keeping the SEAL team pinned down suddenly stopped. The silence that followed felt almost supernatural after the constant noise of combat. Maria immediately began moving toward other wounded team members, while Amira remained in the courtyard center. The trust was fragile, but it was holding. Maria found Petty Officer Davis with a shoulder wound that needed attention and began treating him while keeping one eye on the situation around them. As she worked, Maria noticed Amira had also begun moving. But instead of trying to escape or coordinate another attack, she was approaching a wounded Taliban fighter who had been shot during the initial breach. The irony was stark. Two combat medics treating their respective sides wounded, while their forces maintained an uneasy ceasefire. "Dr. Rashid," Maria called out while bandaging Davis's shoulder. "Your man there needs blood. I have O-negative in my pack if you need it." Amira looked up from her patient, surprise evident on her face. Offering medical supplies to treat enemy wounded was far beyond any standard protocol. "You would give blood to him?" "Medical oath," Maria replied simply. "Same one you took, I imagine." The exchange of medical supplies created something neither woman had expected, a working partnership. Maria found herself calling out medical advice to Amira, who responded with her own suggestions for treating the SEAL team's injuries. Despite being on opposite sides of a war, their shared medical training created a common language that transcended politics. Morrison had used the lull in fighting to contact headquarters and arrange for medical evacuation helicopters. The plan was becoming clearer. Both sides would tend their wounded, then separate without further conflict. It was an imperfect solution that satisfied no one completely, but might prevent additional casualties. As they worked, Amira began talking more freely. "I never intended to become a military commander. When the Americans first came, I worked with your medical teams. I thought we could build something better." Maria continued treating her patients while listening. "What changed?" "Your soldiers killed my brother during a night raid. He was also a doctor, working at a children's hospital. The intelligence was wrong, but he was still dead." Amira's voice remained steady, but Maria could hear the pain underneath. Maria felt a chill run through her. She had participated in dozens of night raids, always trusting the intelligence, always assuming the targets were legitimate threats. The possibility that mistakes had been made, that innocent people had died, was something she tried not to think about. But hearing it from someone whose life had been directly affected made it impossible to ignore. "I'm sorry," Maria said, and she meant it. War makes everyone do things they never thought they would do. Amira finished bandaging her patient and looked directly at Maria. "Yes, it does. But we can still choose how we do them." The sound of approaching helicopters interrupted their conversation. The medical evacuation was arriving, and with it, the end of their temporary truce. Maria knew that once her wounded were evacuated, the tactical situation would change dramatically. Morrison would be obligated to complete the mission, and Amira would resume her role as an enemy combatant. "Dr. Rashid," Maria said urgently, "come with us. You could work with our medical teams again. Help rebuild what was lost." For a moment, Amira seemed to consider the offer. Maria could see the conflict in her expression. The doctor who wanted to heal warring with the commander who felt obligated to fight. But ultimately, the choice had been made long before this day. "My people need me here," Amira replied, "just as yours need you with them." The helicopters landed in a cloud of dust and noise. Maria helped load Williams and the other wounded onto the aircraft, while Morrison prepared his team for extraction. The temporary peace was ending, and everyone knew it. As Maria prepared to board the helicopter, Amira approached her one final time. She handed Maria a piece of paper with writing in both English and Pashto. "Medical clinic locations," Amira explained. "Places where civilians receive treatment. Promise me your air support will avoid them." Maria took the paper, understanding the weight of what Amira was asking. "I promise. And Dr. Rashid, if you ever change your mind about coming in, ask for me. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos. They'll know how to find me." Amira nodded, then stepped back as the helicopter prepared for takeoff. As they lifted into the sky, Maria looked down to see Amira and her fighters melting back into the compound's shadows. Within minutes, they had vanished completely, leaving no trace of their presence except for the treated wounded and the memory of an impossible conversation between two women who had chosen to heal in the midst of war. Morrison sat beside Maria during the flight back to base, both of them quiet as they processed what had happened. Finally, he spoke over the helicopter's noise. "That was either the stupidest thing I've ever seen or the smartest. I'm not sure which." Maria clutched the list of medical clinics in her hand, thinking about Dr. Amira Rashid and the choices that war had forced both of them to make. "Maybe both," she replied. The helicopter carried them away from the compound. But Maria knew that some encounters leave permanent marks on those involved. She had met her mirror image in the person of an enemy, and both women had emerged changed by the experience. In a war where victory was often defined by body counts and territory gained, they had managed something far more difficult. They had remained human.